Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend from Tottenham for securing this important debate today, and my honourable friend from Maidstone and the Weald as well. I want to talk about two things really in this debate: optics and solutions. It's the optics of whatever we do is very, very important, both in this place and obviously in the BBC. There is a saying that says that you can't be what you can't see. I like to sometimes think of it as you can be what you can see. So therefore we need to see more diversity on the BBC. And I accompany that with a short story. A friend of mine, we were talking many years ago, and he's an actor, and he said he can't find any jobs here in the UK. He was on Absolutely Fabulous, and he said he's going to go to America. And we had this big debate on whether it was a good idea for him to go to America. I was very sad to see him leave. Obviously, he did very well, and his name is Idris Elba, and he's now a very household name. But it is a shame that we couldn't keep the talent in-house in the first place. And Madam Deputy Speaker, black people in particular get very excited when we see other black people on TV. And I remember in the days of T-Mobile and after 7 o'clock when the phones would ring because the calls were free to say, did you see that black person on this TV station? And it was the talk, you know, of the community. So optics is so important.
On that point, my honourable friend give way.
Absolutely.
I'm loving my honourable friend's speech, and she is so right. But I think what she illustrates, and you know, she was talking about programmes. I'm thinking of Desmond's, the legendary Real McCoy. Is it isn't just who is in front of the camera. The commissioning editors and the producers are as important if there is to be an accurate portrayal of our different communities on the BBC, and we do not see the kind of stereotyping which unfortunately we have seen year after year after year of our different communities.
My honourable friend makes a valuable point, and I will come to some of that in my speech later on. But on touching on that, I don't watch the BBC that often, to be fair, but I do remember in my younger days watching EastEnders and thinking, this is really strange, being from East End, thinking there's hardly any black people in EastEnders. And then when there was a black person in EastEnders, they were so unrepresentative of any black person that we ever knew in EastEnders. It was a little bit shocking, and that goes to the commissioners and how these things are done. And it's so important, because if you don't understand the culture or, you know, what it means to be, you know, whether disabled or a black person or a woman, you will get it wrong. I must say, my honourable friend from Tottenham mentioned a new drama on the BBC, Undercover. Now, I must say, when I saw the trailers for it, I immediately looked it up and put it on record. I haven't watched any of it yet, but I did only record it because there were 2 black leads, and I got excited again. And also, Adrian Lester is quite hot. I must say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you've come in at the right time. Shonda Rhimes once said, when she was, Shonda Rhimes is a producer and a director and a writer, and she makes these amazing shows such as How to Get Away with Murder and Scandal. And she was once asked, how does she feel about all the diversity she brings to TV? And she responds, what she's actually doing is normalising TV and normalising what we watch. And that's what I demand to see, and I hope the Minister takes this on board, that I demand to see the BBC be normalised in this way. The Olympics is another case in example where black people are seen on the fields, are very well known in sport, yet still the coverage of the Olympics, you very rarely saw any black presenters. And it made me wonder how that could be possible. I'm not sure if there was a report produced at the end of that show, at the end of the Olympics in 2012. According to the Directors UK, only 1.5% of programmes are directed by BAME or Black, Asian and minority ethnic people. And that is fundamentally the root of some of the problems that we have in terms of programmes and programming. The Black and Asian and minority ethnic numbers of people working on TV fell dramatically when the BBC and Channel 4 moved productions outside of London. Then again, you say, well, why was that not considered when they were thinking about the move, that we retain at least what we had as well as building on it? And there's a problem with recruitment in the BBC. The BBC always recruit internally first. Now, what this means is they will only recruit from the people they currently have. That means if it's hideously white, you will only be recruiting and you will only be promoting white people. So therefore, the BBC's recruitment process needs to change. And my honourable friend from Streatham mentioned industry professionals. It's very difficult for industry professionals to see and understand the beauty and the diversity of writing and written material or other materials if they don't understand it. So therefore, the only way that can be readdressed is if you change some of the industry professionals. And therefore, I think it's incumbent on the Minister to ensure that the BBC does this and does this quickly. Happy to give way.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. I was just thinking about those who are worried and concerned about the number of outs as opposed to the remains who are employed by the BBC. I bet it's rather little.
I'm not quite sure I quite followed the Honourable Member's intervention. Somehow I thought that was linked to the EU. Ofcom. Now, any and everything the government thinks is important, it has been said already, but it must be written into the BBC Charter. There is no excuse for it not to be written into the BBC Charter. The BBC Charter already takes into consideration the number of current affairs programmes, how many children's programmes should be made, how many programmes should be made in Scotland and Wales, etc. So therefore, if the BBC and the government are serious about diversity, it must be explicitly written into the Charter with the threat of the BBC losing money if it doesn't fulfil its obligation. And I do hope when the Minister rises that he will say that this will be so. We know that Ofcom oversees the TV industry, but not the BBC. And the BBC, I hope that will change, and the BBC board needs to be, in my opinion, and I think in many people that were asked, they must be completely independent. I also think that currently there are Scottish, Welsh, Irish and English audience panels to represent their interest to Ofcom, but there isn't a BAME, Black and Asian Minority Ethnic panel to represent their interest to Ofcom. And money has gone into the parts where there has been, or there is, audience panels. Therefore, it stands to reason that if we want to see more money go into the Black and the Asian and the minority ethnic area, then a panel, an audience panel, is the way to go. Absolutely.
Grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. I wonder if I can just take her back to a point she made a few seconds ago when she said that she thought the BBC board ought to be completely independent, free presumably of government interference in their appointments. Might she be willing to consider, as a way of achieving that independence, the need to have elections to the board to deliver that true independence?
My honourable friend with these radical solutions in true form, I think, yes, I would agree that there should be elections, and I think that it will produce interesting results, and that's what we need to happen. Ofcom should ensure that the Black, Asian, minority ethnic population should have a systematic process to have their views and concerns heard by the industry, as I say, by setting up this advisory board. I cannot stress to the Minister how important a solution this is. We're often talk about problems in this place, but not the solution. I hope the Minister will take this on board. Absolutely.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way a second time to me, but I think particularly in respect to the point that she's making, I think where you see the real hard end, and this is a very serious point, in where things go wrong if we don't have appropriate diversity, is the representation of our Muslim communities. And the rising Islamophobia that we see is in no small part to certain broadcasters, I've seen it happen on the BBC, but on others, who put up so-called community leaders who purport to speak for that community but have no mandate whatsoever to do so. If we had a panel on board like this, it would increase the chances of the BBC and others, frankly, of getting this right and properly representing, in particular, the Muslim community.
Well done.
John Bell.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. Absolutely. This is one of such important solutions to this problem. It means that you're not just relying on those people thinking they know who to go to. It means you open and widen the field to actually the community who actually know who to go to. This advisory board would be based on exactly the same model as the existing advisory committees in each nation, which currently provides Ofcom with detailed and expert insights into particular challenges faced by citizens and consumers in different parts of the UK. Black, Asian, minority ethnic interests would also be ensured by representation on Ofcom's content board and the communications consumer panel. Currently, the UK Black, Asian, minority ethnic community make up a larger proportion of the UK population than any specific nation, with the exception of England, and yet they can often only make up less than 12% on any advisory board, meaning that their voices are not heard as clearly as the people of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The Minister has a chance to put that right, and I'm sure with his enthusiasm and commitment to the cause, I'm sure he will do so. I'm
just Brendan MacNeil. Could I help the Honourable Lady hopefully and say that I would hope that her ambition would be greater than the voice of those enjoyed by of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. I would hope that the ethnic minority voice would be stronger, because we sometimes feel our voice is not very strong at all. So I wish her well.
I just might help for a second, just to say that we did have an informal 10 minutes, and the people who are intervening were hoping to be the next speakers. And I wouldn't like to have to put them down the list, don't Butler?
I'm coming to the end now, Mr. Speaker, but I completely agree. My ambition for my community is always as big as it possibly can be and holds no bounds. My one last plea, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the real McCoy. There's been a campaign, a long-standing campaign over many years for the BBC to bring back the real McCoy. And one of the reasons for this not being done, apparently, is that the archives has been lost. And I wonder if the Minister would be able to look into this issue for me, because if in fact the archive has been lost, it says to me that the BBC felt very little. Mr. Deputy Speaker, a member from the secondary position just kissed his teeth, which I'm sure the Hansard will not be able to prove, which basically means it's a very bad thing that happened. Would the Minister please investigate this for me, because it would show that the BBC had very little regard for this programme that was such a funny, legendary programme. And if he could please get back to me, I know not now, but later on, because it would be a shame if that was the case. And one last thing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the BBC is at threat from the internet. Lots of groups and communities run their own programmes and shows on the internet because their voices are not being heard. I was part of Star Media and had my show to connect with the Somali community. And I just think it's a shame if the BBC doesn't grab the nettle now and run with the suggestions. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Gareth Thomas.
Mr Deputy Speaker, like others who've spoken before, I am an enthusiast for the BBC. Yet I find myself